Joining me now is Liberal Senator Alex Antic. Alex, I feel like we've come off peak welcome to country. Even Qantas is subjecting us to a more truncated version in recent months. You were one of the early objectors to the practice, but gosh, we've seen a few recent examples of some pushback, haven't we?
Yeah, look, Caroline, we have, and I mean, it's not particularly surprising. I think the only thing that's surprising is that politics in our institutions take so long to catch up to what real Australians are thinking. That's been the thing that's been most stark for me. I mean, we, made a bit of noise about this in the Senate chamber 2 years ago, and I've never seen anything explode in the world of social media more, to be quite honest. I mean, it was clearly touching a nerve to suggest that we don't need to be welcome to our own country. And I think Aussies are sick of it. I think whatever the original intent of this was, it's been lost, and it now feels quite performative and almost quite forced. It feels almost like it's being used now as a way of telling people that they're not on their own land, that they are effectively guests on their own land. And I mean, it's not hard to imagine why that would rile people up. I think, unfortunately, politics doesn't always see these things quickly. We saw that with The Voice. It was very clear Australians didn't want The Voice. It was very clear it was another form of division, and yet it took until the October period where we actually learnt that was the case in a secret ballot. So I think we're seeing the same with Welcome to Country. I was actually on an airliner the other day that didn't do it at all, and it sort of stuck out because I was so used to hearing it when the plane lands. We thank the traditional owners and so forth, but they didn't do it. So look, I think we are. My point about this, though, would be that the activist left who push this, and they push it into our boardrooms, into our schools, they will come up with something else. So the interest for me now is understanding what it is, which vehicle they'll hijack next in order to properly push the grievance industry. And if so, let's find out what it is early so that we can call it out early and not have to endure years and years of it like we have with Welcome to Country ceremonies.
Yeah, fair enough. Senator Pauline Hanson, she's also long objected to Welcome to Country. She criticised opposition leader Susan Ley for her acknowledgement at Press Club. Have a listen.
I was disgusted, absolutely disgusted with it, because the Liberals, they're getting acknowledgements. They were the ones that actually opposed the voice to Parliament. What a load of rubbish that is. Australians, I'll tell you out there, you are the ones. You are deciding your future and the future of this nation. If you want to put up with this rubbish, this crap, well then you're to blame for it.
Pauline shy as always. I suspect there will be varying views within the party room, and that's pretty standard fare for the Liberal Party. But what's your view on how the Liberals should approach this?
Well, I'm not sure there really is a position for the party per se. I mean, this is something that's done in the private sector and elsewhere. I mean, I'm not comfortable with it appearing as often as it does in government ranks through the bureaucracy. I think that's something that could be discussed as being removed. But I mean, it's up to each individual person. Of course, there are divergences of views on the issue inside the party, and that's completely fine. My own personal view is that I don't like it, and I don't like seeing it as often as we do. And also, I don't understand what it's actually doing for Aboriginal people. I want someone to explain to me how this helps. And if it doesn't, then it's performative. And we always hear from the left how the right of politics only talks about the culture wars. Well, you can't have it both ways. So, if this is really doing some good for Aboriginal people, then let's hear it and let's find out how. Otherwise, my preference is to stay away from it.
Yeah, fair enough. And an interesting story in the Oz about the kingmakers in the Senate during the last Parliament and how they plan to take on Labor this time around. You obviously sit in that chamber. What's their strategy and will it work?
Well, I read the article and I read the comments, and I think it's just the real politic of it, in a sense that the last term, I think all of them were involved in pretty serious discussions with the government about the passage of legislation throughout the Senate chamber, and at one time or another may have held the balance of power, I think. So it's going to be a very different landscape for these crossbench senators. The wash-up of it is that Labor really just need the Greens in order to pass legislation, which is in itself a worry. I mean, in many respects, we might have to look back to the good old days of having the last Parliament, of having the crossbench controlling the show. They did a very good job, I might say, by shooting down the misinformation laws. And were very sensible on that, and probably many other things as well. But no, in this case, they're going to have to find another way through for relevance. They have said, and David Pocock has said, that using the media and using their voice that way is the way to do it. And I think that's what we'll see. I think we'll see more and more statements in the chamber, more and more statements in the media, and that is their absolute right. And that's what our democracy is all about.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. And it'll be very interesting to see what that looks like over the course of the term. Now, Tony Burke, he appears to be walking both sides of the street again. This time he's blaming the High Court for making it too hard to deport some immigrant criminals. How much is it the High Court and how much is it just a lack of political will to deal with it?
Well, I think this is always a point of interest when you have politicians who are in government, by the way, just for the sake of the argument, we should just really clear that, who have the ability, the legislative ability to do pretty much what they like now, and to sort of lean into the argument that somehow this is the High Court's fault is utterly ludicrous, frankly. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. The only thing you could say is that we're in a hiatus with Parliament at the moment, so there's not the ability to pass laws now. But look, we've heard this before with the arguments about the courts do this and the courts do that. The reality is it's the government's job, one of its primary jobs, to keep Australians safe in their own country. And we expect that out of our immigration minister. Any finger pointing, any blame is simply not acceptable. So I don't accept that at all. If the government thinks there's something that should be done, they should be doing it themselves, not blaming the High Court.
Now, onto the least surprising story of the day, and a $12.5 billion Central Queensland hydrogen project has been axed. The boondoggles are biting the dust pretty hard, aren't they, at the moment?
Yeah, and look, I mean, it's sort of, as you say, the least surprising thing you could hear, and it's reassuring in one sense, except that, you know, we're still, of course, through the political spectrum, making the same mistakes every single day with intermittent power, green and, you know, so-called green power, solar and wind. But yes, this is the first one. And of course, those of us that have always said, let's let the market decide what's good power and what's bad power, just shake our heads at this. This was never going to work. And in fact, these things have a habit of these green hydrogen, so-called green hydrogen propositions seem to get no further past than feasibility studies, and the private sector drops them. So, I mean, this is the issue with this so-called intermittent, you know, renewable power, is it really doesn't stand on its own 2 feet without government intervention. Here in South Australia, we've seen at least 2 projects that have been dropped, I think, in recent times. And yet we keep getting told that by the Malinowskis Labor government here that we're going to be a green energy superpower. Quite how you export enough through wind and solar is anyone's guess. But putting that little anomaly aside, I think this is where we're going with this. The tragedy of it all, Caroline, is that before the penny drops, the entire grid is going to be in a catastrophe if it's not already. And so we're actually learning this lesson on the run where we shouldn't be. I mean, this is one of the many arguments for why net zero needs to be dropped immediately. And we need to get on with getting the cheapest power we can by any means.
Yeah, cheap and reliable. That is absolutely what our country needs for its future prosperity. Thank you, as always, Alex Antic.